She owned diamonds commissioned by the emperor himself, tiaras designed as acts of love and defiance, pearls passed down through generations of royalty. Yet at the Vienna court, where jewelry announced a woman's place in the hierarchy, Sophie was systematically prevented from displaying these jewels where they mattered most. Her husband removed his white glove, placed his hand on a Bible, and declared before the entire imperial government that their children would never inherit the throne. With that oath, he disinherited his family before they were even conceived. This wasn't a scandal. This was the price of loving someone the Habsburg court deemed unworthy. Her name was Sophie Chotek, and the jewels she owned but couldn't wear tell the story of how an empire tried to make her invisible. When we think of royal jewels, we imagine them as symbols of power, status, and belonging. But for Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, her magnificent collection became something else entirely, evidence of a cruel paradox. She possessed jewelry fit for an empress, pieces commissioned by the finest court jeweler, gifts from the emperor himself, heirlooms from her husband's family. Yet she was forbidden from wearing them at the very occasions where such jewels proclaimed a woman's worth. The Habsburg court didn't just disapprove of Sophie, they weaponized visibility itself against her. At imperial balls and state dinners, where diamonds announced rank and pearls whispered of legitimacy, Sophie's jewels remained locked away. But here's what makes Sophie's story so remarkable. She never broke. And in the one place where she had freedom, away from Vienna's cruelty, she wore her jewels openly, creating a life of quiet dignity in a world designed to crush her spirit. Today, I'm taking you inside one of history's most heartbreaking love stories, told through the jewels that witnessed it all. The Impossible Love. Sophie Maria Josephine Albina Chotek was born on March 1, 1868, to an ancient Bohemian aristocratic family. The Choteks traced their lineage to the 14th century, impressive by any standard. But in the rigid hierarchy of the Habsburg court, lineage wasn't enough. You had to be from a reigning royal house, and the Choteks, despite their noble blood, were not. When Sophie's father died, she faced genteel poverty and needed employment. She entered service as a lady-in-waiting to Archduchess Isabella, respectable work, but servitude nonetheless. Her role was to be invisible, to carry shawls, arrange flowers, and vanish when not needed. Contemporary accounts describe Sophie as more elegant and imposing than beautiful, with exceptional culture and knowledge. She spoke German, English, and French fluently, danced elegantly, and played tennis very well. What drew others to her was her unaffected grace. She was perceptive, amiable, and unpretentious. Around 1894, her path crossed with Archduke Franz Ferdinand's. The chemistry was instantaneous and dangerous. Franz Ferdinand had never been meant to be heir to the throne. A succession of deaths thrust him into a position he never wanted. Then came tuberculosis. The Vienna court sent him away to die quietly. The emperor even began grooming Franz Ferdinand's younger brother for the throne instead. But Franz Ferdinand survived through sheer force of will. He returned to Vienna as a man with a burning grievance, done playing by the court's rules. For him, Sophie represented sanctuary, a woman who loved him for himself, not his position. For Sophie, Franz Ferdinand offered genuine love, intellectual partnership, and recognition of her worth, far more precious than jewels. They began a courtship in shadows, stolen moments, whispered words, insistent letters. For 2 years, they kept the secret. Franz Ferdinand would leave his pocket watch behind at Isabella's palace, merely to have an excuse to retrieve it and see Sophie. The scandal. The secret collapsed in 1898 on a tennis court. Franz Ferdinand left behind his gold pocket watch with a locket attached. Archduchess Isabella, convinced the locket contained a portrait of one of her daughters, opened it. Instead, she stared at a photograph of her own lady-in-waiting. The rage that followed was biblical. Isabella dismissed Sophie immediately, screaming accusations of witchcraft. Sophie was thrown out of the palace, her reputation in tatters. Isabella then wrote to the emperor. Emperor Franz Joseph I summoned Franz Ferdinand and delivered a simple command. Put an end to this nonsense immediately. She is a nobody. You will marry a princess, or you will marry no one. But Franz Ferdinand looked the emperor in the eye and said the impossible, no. The standoff lasted nearly a year. They tried to bribe him with the most beautiful princesses in Europe. They threatened him. But Franz Ferdinand had already faced death and was no longer afraid. In a letter to a friend, he wrote, I have finally found a woman who loves me for myself and not for my position, and you expect me to give her up. I will never marry anyone else. I will wait for her until the day I die. Finally, through international pressure from the German Kaiser, the Russian Tsar, and even Pope Leo XIII, the emperor relented. You may marry her. But then came the hammer. But she will never be one of us, and your children will be nothing. The wedding jewels. On June 28, 1900, Franz Ferdinand was forced to appear before the entire imperial government. He stood alone. Sophie was not allowed to be present. He removed his white glove, placed his hand on a Bible, and read the oath declaring his marriage morganatic and his children ineligible to succeed to the throne. With that stroke of ink, he disinherited his future family. 3 days later, the wedding took place at Reichstadt. Emperor Franz Joseph did not attend. Franz Ferdinand's brothers did not attend. The pews were empty of the family supposed to celebrate the heir's marriage. But Archduchess Maria Theresa, Franz Ferdinand's stepmother, defied the emperor's boycott. The night before the wedding, she gave Sophie an extraordinary gift, a jewelry box that had belonged to Franz Ferdinand's mother. It was not merely an object, it was a statement. You have worth, you have history, you are worthy of recognition. Look at the wedding photographs. Sophie wore white satin with embroidered silk. On her head sat a diamond tiara, the emperor's wedding present despite his refusal to attend, with a double row of pearls and diamonds around her neck. Most significantly, Franz Ferdinand had personally commissioned a diamond tiara for Sophie, deliberately designed to look regal, a private defiance against the court that called her a commoner. Every diamond was a small act of rebellion against the institution trying to erase her. Sophie looked radiant, but there was a shadow of anxiety. She knew what this wedding cost him. She knew what those jewels meant. They represented a love so powerful that it had forced an emperor to bend. The paradox of precious stones. Here lies the cruelest irony. Sophie owned remarkable jewelry, pieces commissioned by the finest court jeweler Koshut, pieces given by the emperor himself, pieces from her husband as acts of love and defiance. Yet, at the Vienna court, where jewelry was the language of rank and value, Sophie was systematically prevented from displaying these jewels where they mattered most. Sophie would be forever barred from the title of Empress. She was condemned to a social standing inferior to every other archduchess, forced to accept a rank so low that she would be outshined even by teenage princesses. At imperial balls, state dinners, and official ceremonies where jewelry announced a woman's place in the hierarchy, Sophie appeared diminished. Protocol dictated that she could not share her husband's rank and therefore could not display the jewels that a wife of the heir apparent should have worn. Think of the psychological torment. To own a tiara deliberately designed to look regal, a private defiance against the court, yet be forbidden from wearing it in public. To possess a jewelry box that belonged to your husband's mother, a tangible connection to legitimacy, yet be treated as if you didn't exist in that family's present. To receive the emperor's wedding gift of diamonds and pearls, yet sit at the far end of dinner tables where no light touched those stones. The mechanism of her daily humiliation was orchestrated by Prince Alfred von Montenuovo, Lord Chamberlain of the imperial household. He dusted off the strictest, most archaic rules of Spanish court etiquette and applied them with sadistic precision. Protocol itself became a weapon of war, and the visible display of jewelry became another tool of control. Imagine a typical evening at a Vienna court ball. Franz Ferdinand walks to the front of the room to take his place beside the emperor. But Sophie must wait. She must wait for the archduchesses, the princesses, even teenage debutantes. Only when every single woman with royal blood has entered is Sophie finally allowed to walk in, alone, the last of the nobility. Her jewelry, however beautiful, was rendered invisible by the very positioning designed to hide her. At dinner, Franz Ferdinand sat at the head. Sophie was placed at the very far end, seated next to the lowest-ranking clerks. Husband and wife could not speak to each other. If a foreign king visited Vienna, Sophie was banned from the state dinner entirely, forced to eat alone in her room. The magnificent jewels she owned had no audience, no purpose, no power in that enforced isolation. Konopishe, where jewels finally shone. What made Sophie's situation extraordinary was her response. She never made a scene. She never cried in public. She walked into those ballrooms with her head held high, smiling politely at women who refused to speak to her. She understood. If she showed anger, the court won. So she wore her dignity like armor. Contemporary accounts paint a consistent picture of exceptional character. She was widely read, deeply religious, intelligent, with an impeccable moral life. Yet despite this perfection, snubs continued year after year. But in the one domain where she had freedom, at Konopishe Castle, away from Vienna, Sophie wore her jewels openly. She displayed the diamonds and pearls that represented her private identity, her value in Franz Ferdinand's eyes, and her refusal to be erased. Franz Ferdinand had transformed Konopishe into a luxurious family home with electric elevators, central heating, and modern plumbing. At Konopishe, the emperor's rules did not apply. Prince Montenuovo had no power there. Sophie could wear her jewelry freely. The pieces commissioned by Kochut, pieces given by Archduchess Maria Theresa, pieces inherited in that precious jewelry box, all could finally shine in the candlelight of their private domain. Visitors were shocked to find Franz Ferdinand rolling on the floor with his 3 children, Sophie, Max, and Ernst. This was revolutionary behavior for a Habsburg. But Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were hands-on parents who created a bubble of love to protect their children. Sophie created one of the most magnificent rose gardens in Europe, planting over 3,000 varieties. While Vienna was cold and grey, her garden was alive with colour. Here, adorned with her jewels in the privacy of her own home, she was the empress. The servants at Konopishe adored her. They called her Your Highness regardless of the laws. They saw how she treated them with respect and dignity. She was the heart of the household. One day in the sun. For 20 years, Sophie had been forbidden from standing beside her husband at official functions. But in November 1913, King George V and Queen Mary invited Franz Ferdinand and Sophie to Windsor Castle. For 1 week, Sophie experienced what she had been denied at home: public recognition, social equality, and the dignity of standing beside her husband without restriction. The British royals treated Sophie as what she legally was, the wife of the heir to a major European power. Then, in spring 1914, Franz Ferdinand realized something. The strict rules of the Vienna court only applied at court. They did not apply to the army. As Inspector General of the Austro-Hungarian Armed Forces, under military protocol, Sophie would be treated according to his rank, not hers. In Sarajevo, she would not be a nobody. She could walk beside him. She could sit beside him. An invitation arrived to observe military maneuvers in Bosnia. The date, June 28, 1914, their 14th wedding anniversary. 14 years to the day since Franz Ferdinand had signed the oath of renunciation. In Sarajevo, Sophie would finally be permitted to ride beside Franz Ferdinand publicly, to be seen as his equal, to receive the honours due to the wife of a commanding officer. Though others tried to dissuade her from the trip, fearing danger, she insisted, "As long as the Archduke shows himself in public today, I will not leave him." After 14 years of being forbidden from standing beside her husband, Sophie was determined to spend this one moment, their anniversary, their one day of public equality, at his side. The final humiliation. On June 28, 1914, at approximately 10:45 a.m., Franz Ferdinand and Sophie entered the streets of Sarajevo in an open-topped car. It was their first public moment together in 14 years where they were permitted to sit side by side, and it would be their last. According to witnesses, Franz Ferdinand cried out, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die, live for our children." Sophie died en route to the hospital. Franz Ferdinand followed minutes later. The symmetry is almost unbearable. Sophie had finally achieved public equality with her husband, and that very moment became her death. She died in the rare moment when her jewelry, her presence, and her rank were all finally visible and honoured. The Habsburg court ensured that humiliation would extend beyond death itself. When the bodies returned to Vienna, they were smuggled in at night in plain municipal hearses. Sophie's coffin was placed on a stool 20 inches lower than Franz Ferdinand's. Her coffin was plain wood, while his was ornate silver. She was given no imperial flag, only white gloves and a black fan, the symbols of a lady-in-waiting. This is the cruelest irony. Montenuovo refused to allow any insignia on Sophie's coffin, none of the jewelry, regalia, or symbols that would have proclaimed her rank. The woman who owned diamonds commissioned by the emperor, tiaras designed as acts of love and defiance, was denied even the visual markers of rank in death. The funeral was classified as third class, the lowest tier for noble burials. The children, orphaned at 13, 12, and 10, were barred from the funeral procession. Later, when the children left Konopishe, they were stripped of their inheritance. They had to leave with a small little suitcase that was searched to be sure that they didn't take any souvenirs. The jewelry, the treasures of Konopishe, all confiscated. The historical record reveals Count Thun had to sell Sophie's jewels to support the orphaned children. The diamonds and pearls that had symbolized her private value, her defiance, her dignity, all scattered to the winds, sold to strangers, lost to history. Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, was treated by the Habsburg court as if she did not exist, despite being the lawfully married wife of the heir to the throne. The mechanisms of her erasure were sophisticated. The morganatic marriage oath, the seating charts, the ceremonial protocols, and most painfully, the restriction on wearing the magnificent jewelry she owned. Yet Sophie's jewels became silent witnesses to a story far different from the court's narrative. Every diamond in the tiara Franz Ferdinand commissioned proclaimed, "I see your worth. I defy this institution for you." The jewelry box from his mother spoke of legitimacy and belonging. At Konopishe, her jewels finally shone. In candlelit rooms away from Vienna's cruelty, Sophie wore the pieces that represented her true place in the world. As the wife of the man who loved her absolutely, the mother of 3 children, the woman who inspired her husband to dream of reforming an entire empire. The Habsburg court failed in its attempt to reduce Sophie's jewelry to meaninglessness. Those pieces represented something the court could never take, proof that one man had loved one woman so profoundly that he was willing to renounce thrones and defy emperors for her. Sophie's jewels remain evidence of a love that transcended social hierarchy, of a woman whose worth could never be completely erased by protocol or prejudice, and of a moment, one glorious, terrible moment in Sarajevo, when she finally stood beside her husband as his equal, adorned not just with the diamonds she owned, but with the visible recognition she had earned. The jewels that Vienna court forbade her to wear ultimately became the most powerful witnesses to Sophie's story. They glittered with the truth the Habsburg court tried so desperately to suppress. Which part of Sophie's story moved you most? The jewelry box given as an act of defiance, the tiara commissioned as a declaration of love, or perhaps the cruel irony that her jewels could only shine in private, away from the court that should have honored them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if Sophie's story touched your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more untold stories of remarkable women and their jewels waiting to be shared. Thank you for watching.